Oh, very much so. I work on two sizes of paintings. One is 152 by 122 centimetres, and the other is 92 by 122. And the reason I stick to these sizes is that I know what designs will fit onto those boards. Quite a lot of the paintings I do are actually several of these panels linked, but each panel has a statement, if you want to say, in its own right, a statement to me, that is.
And do you do any more detailed work rather than with large rags and large circles and large shapes?
Well, within the painting, do you
Yes, and if so, do you
yes,
use brushes then, or do you?
Well, sometimes I use baby buds dipped in the paint, which I find that then you can actually draw. You can actually draw in paint, so you have once again a freedom, which is what the big problem about painting at all, which I incidentally find very hard work, is the fact that you can be restricted, and in that way it inhibits you. It inhibits your subject. So what I like to do is, in effect, be as free as possible, absolutely as free as possible. And then when the painting is finished, even if it's unfinished, if it's finished to me, then the atmosphere of that painting has been created, and that's it. It's ready.
You mentioned earlier you had two strands, dimensions, the black and white and the colour.
Right.
Many people would say, well, black and white sketching precedes a colour representation, which I know not to be the case. But
yeah.
What was it in your case?
Well, the whole idea was that, as I said before, I wanted to, in a way, to have not a style exactly, but a way of expressing something. I wasn't really worried about the technique, but I was worried about, in a way, the actual method of transferring an idea from my mind, if you want, to a board. So I experimented for several years using just black and white, which meant that I had to rely on my drawing, if you like. I mean, drawing is extremely important to me. Basic drawing, that is, a traditional drawing. And so I only had to rely on the shapes and the sort of rhythm and the shapes between the shapes, if you like. So it had to have a sort of continuity from one side of the board to the other. Had I added colour at that time, it would have ruined the whole thing. It would have given a balance which I didn't want. I knew that putting a large red shape or a large green shape would do something, but that would change the balance, and I didn't want that.
You mentioned drawing there, and yet now, would you say you don't do any drawing at all?
Not really, no, I don't. No.
Drawing implies a kind of detail and a fineness and a control that perhaps, well, my control's wrong. You can still have control at that level.
Well, yes, I mean, I believe, again for myself, I believe in traditional drawing. At art college, one spent several hours a week traditionally drawing life drawing, still life and studio work. And I think actually that's, to me anyway, that's really grammar of abstract work. It has been for me.
So you have grammar. Grammar implies language, language implies communication. What are you trying to tell me in your paintings?
What am I trying to tell you? Well, in a way, I have to admit, I think painters really paint for themselves. I certainly do. I don't mean that in a selfish way, although it is a selfish remark to a certain extent. I don't think anybody in a gallery or whatever can really see what you're getting at, get into the mind of the actual sort of original concept. You can say you like the painting, you don't like the painting, you have a rapport with it or whatever. But I don't think one can ever actually fully understand the original idea. So I'm really painting a painting that in a way pleases me, and if it's finished, it's finished. If other people like it, yes, I'm very pleased, obviously. But I think that's really all you can say.
So you're expressing rather than communicating?
Yes.
When you've expressed something, how do you judge the success in your own terms now?
Oh, it's a very difficult question. Sometimes, well, everybody has always overworked painting. The secret, I suppose, is to know when to stop. That is a problem. I always underwork paintings. And although I work in a way quite fast, I have sort of breaks where I sit and just stare at a painting and say, well, is this finished or isn't it? Does it need this to be added or not? And will it be the richer or the poorer for having this mark being put there? And quite often you can say, well, yes, this needs a mark, it needs a shape or something. You put it there and it's wrong. You've ruined the paint. You can tell.
You can't subtract?
Yes, you can. I mean, but this, of course, is a lengthy process, and I like, in a way, to be, in a way, if I can use a contradiction, almost a sort of planned spontaneity. So, in a way, that really rather goes against the grain. I like to be able to know that I put that mark in the right place, and it is right. Of course, every paint doesn't work. I mean, if it doesn't work, then
what do you do?
Paint over it.
Paint over it.
Paint over it.
Abolish
yeah.
it.
Yes, yes. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And yet you talked about series earlier on.
Right.
So a painting exists in its own right, but exists within a greater whole.
That's right. I mean, there are paintings that another series I've done from Polish Ideas is a triptych, which are directly related, and they will always hopefully be hung together. They need to be hung together. They rely on each other. But there are some paintings which are part of a series, which, as you say, is a painting in its own right and can be left on its own. But I feel like any form of discussion group, any form of language, which a painting is really in a way, that the idea must be worked through to its conclusion.
When you say they have to be hung together, do they have to be hung in a certain order?
Yes.
They must be.
Oh yes, they don't work any other way.
Right.
Yes,
is that because, for me looking at it, I need to see the progression through them, or because they make a complete tapestry? Or some other reason?
Well, in a way, both. There are certain stages within a series of paintings which are obvious. I mean, my paintings are quite obvious. They're quite bold objects within the paintings, and you can tell quite obviously how they progress. With a triptych, of course, they have also to be related in a certain way. But having said that, with a series of paintings, you could take one out, and it should stand up on its own.
Your paintings are quite large, aren't they?
Well, yes, they're made up of panels. As I said earlier, they're made up of panels of either 92 by 122 centimetres.
Does that mean that they have to be large? You obviously prefer them to be large, but could you express yourselves in a miniature?
Well, I do to a certain extent as a rough sort of kick-off. I do a lot of poster paint sketches, which are not the painting itself. They're things in their own right, but they're in a way like a sort of mid-stage between the idea and just to get a rough idea what the paintings will look like. I was telling you about this triptych that I did from Poland. They're mostly blue with just one or two black, white and red marks on them. Now I had to find out if those black, white and red marks are going to look right, even if on the finished painting they're going to be slightly different. I wanted to know actually if that combination looked right. I did in my mind, but would it look right in the sketch? So if when I put these three pieces of paper together in the studio, the answer is this, they did, and that's how I came to do it.
So if you had a series of three and the third one didn't work,
Keep changing it until you...
Will you keep changing it and try and recreate it, or do you ever accept that you can't achieve can transfer what's up there?
No, I know when it'll work. It's just getting it right. There are paintings which I know will only work in threes, and it's just a matter of getting it right. That's the idea of doing these poster paint sketches, really, to make sure that roughly what it's going to look like.
So I'm thinking now of someone that's a young artist and so on, that if something's not going right, I mean, what strategies do you have to cope with that and to overcome that, or do you leave it for another day? Do you come back, work at it?
That's quite often a good idea, actually, to sleep on it. Yes, I often do that. If you're working late into the night, which I often do, you can get overtired and not think straight and ruin a painting. Oh no, there's nothing. Or you just simply go on to another painting for a while and think about something else. I quite often work on two paintings.
If you were doing a particular painting, do you always start at a particular point on the canvas?
No, I don't think so. I've never thought about it. I don't really think so, but I know where... I mean, I work in a sequence of colours, so for example, I know that I'm going to put the lighter colours on first, for the simple reason if you put on, say, an ultramarine or a black, even more importantly than that, you can't really, on the board, think of anything else, so that dominates the work. So I'll probably start with something like a yellow of one sort or other.
So for technical reasons, there's an order of priority for colours going down on canvas, but not of object or not of position.
No, that's right. That's right.
So you couldn't therefore start from... what I'm trying to get at is, if something wasn't working, could you come at it from a different angle and it may work differently, or do you always approach it from the same mental picture?
I think yes, I would always approach it from the beginning sort of concept, because I know it will work. It's just that I might not be capable of doing it at that time. You know, there are some shapes which you just feel good with, and you know they work.
What's the worst scenario that you had to redraw a picture, repaint a picture before you got it right?
Well, I've been working on one very recently. I got the idea from just looking out of a coach window on the way back from through Belgium, and I just got the idea immediately. It was a type of landscape, but it was also using unusual colours for a landscape. It was blues, reds, and whites, and it had some shapes that I felt that I wanted to do in it, which were a real problem. But I knew it would work eventually, and I did several sketches for this, and on the painting itself I worked on it for hours and hours, and I was on the point of actually destroying it, but yet I could see that it still had something that I wanted, so I didn't really want to start right from the beginning, so I just left it for a few hours, came back and I saw the shapes that were needed, and now it worked. I'm very happy with it.
You saw the shapes, that you saw parts of it that were right?
Yes.
And you worked on the other parts?
Yes, that's right. Yes, I mean there was a large area, for example, which sort of crept in from the left-hand side, which was black, and it had sort of colours butting into it. But quite simply, to tell you, the paintings were butting in at the wrong angle. It was as simple as that. But I couldn't see that until I did it. It's obvious once I'd done it, and it was right. It looked right, and it's worked.
You painted a large number of works of art over for 20 odd years.
Yeah, 30 odd.
30 odd years.
Yes.
You can't keep them all on your living room walls. What happens to them, and which ones do you keep?
Well, this is a difficult question. I mean, I put them into store, obviously, and they're photographed and then they're stored. I don't actually have too many paintings around the house of my own. I don't like paintings all over the place. I just have one or two paintings which I know, which I'm happy with. One particular one I have, which I think I painted in 1978, and it's just one it's not a very large one actually, and that's been on the wall for more or less all that time, and I just like that. But normally I like to get rid of paintings.
You say you just like that. You just like that, or it means something particular because the symbols are particularly strong symbols here?
Well, it's a painting that was a sort of, in a way, a mid-stage between something that was representational. It was one that was quite highly coloured, very highly stylised as well, and it had various experiments in it which were in a way a turning point. One example is that I had various areas of colours which I surrounded by an equal black line, and that isolated the colours, but it also at the same time made the design feel stronger, and that just worked. It was just one of those sort of paintings that sort of worked at that time, and I often look at it. But normally I don't like to look at my work after a while. I get not exactly tired of it, but I'd like to get rid of it and go on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, if you see them in a gallery, of course, they take on a different mood or meaning. But I like to start on something new.
You mentioned you're still working on the Spanish theme.
I'm working on the Spanish and on the Polish one, more or less, sort of alternatively.
Mm-hmm. Do you play music when you're working?
Yes.
You mentioned Spanish music
Yes,
in particular.
yes, I do. Yes.
That influences the output and the style and the...
I don't like background music, but I think I love flamenco music, and flamenco music to a great extent is often played within a noise of a lot of Spanish people or in a cafe or in a restaurant, and I find that works very well with my work. Well, I don't like sort of endless pop music just playing just to sort of kill a quietness. Mm-hmm. That just would actually put me off from painting.
You're using music much more proactively as part of the creative process.
It is really, yes. Yes.
And the Polish stuff, is there music involved in that, or...?
No, that's purely ideas. The idea of going to Poland, seeing lots of different shapes and ideas and different ways of living, if you like, that somebody in Poland wouldn't actually even notice. I did, because it was completely different. And I just found I had a wealth of ideas. I spent some time in the Jewish district in Krakow, and from that I've got quite a lot of ideas for paintings, which I know will keep me for the next year or so, I'm quite sure.
I won't say how you get ideas, but how do you set up situations which will, you believe, create more ideas?
It really, in a way, happens. It's just something that you know you're keen on. The original idea that you're very keen on, and it excites you, and you do it, and you think, yes, you know, I could do something from that, and that's so it goes on. And I think if you're sort of excited about something, it just has its own momentum.
I was thinking the mountains, the snow. Yeah. You said you went down the Jewish quarter. Yeah. Do you find by going to a different sort of environment, it's more likely, therefore, because it's fresh to you,
Yes.
to generate new thoughts
Oh, yes,
and therefore
certainly.
new ideas.
Yes, really stupid things. They can be things like just a little box of flowers on a windowsill or something. There's a cemetery in